Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Marty Ringlein on the podcast. He is the co-founder and CEO of Agree.com. He is also the general partner in Adventure Fund. So we talk a lot about startups. We talk a lot about payments. Agree.com is a revenue contract to cash revenue cycle business, essentially helping companies get the contract signed, but also get invoices paid and using generative AI to do so in a fast fashion. So we also talk a lot about his early stage investing. He sold a business early in his career to Twitter. So I think regardless of if you're in the venture capital or in the startup world, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. So let's get Marty on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. Marty, good to see you. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, we'll apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning, but I'm glad we made it work. I guess let's start off and give a little bit of an overview of a little about who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Yeah, so big background on me, started comp sci undergrad, fell in love with design, engineering, web development in the early 2000s, built my first company, sold it to Twitter, had a few other startup exits in between there, Eventbrite, Brex. So I've seen everything from consumer mobile to fintech. Now I run a startup called Agree.com. We just raised about $10 million. We're in the market about 18 months. So pretty early stage company, still in that 0 to 1 phase. And then I also am the GP of Adventure Fund, small $10 million VC fund that invests in early stage startups. But we got some fun ones in there, Beehive, people might be familiar with, and then some big name brands now, but would have been crazy bets a long time ago. But ones that have IPO'd recently, Chime, Figma, and then the ones that people are most familiar with today would be Anthropic, SpaceX.
And so just to touch on that real quick, so how did you get access to Anthropic before everybody else? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, usually it's a friend of a friend. And sometimes there are vehicles like SPVs where you're buying somebody else's stake or you're letting an employee get some secondaries. And this was a while ago, so I know there's a lot of Anthropic conversation right now, but Anthropic's trying to lock that down. And there's a few SPVs more recently that are pushed out. Luckily, we predate a lot of that. But honestly, with some of these, because I only do early stage, but Anthropic's a fun one where I think we did like a $13 billion valuation, which is not early stage at all, right? Some companies like that. There's some classic tech startups where their valuations, like Dropbox doesn't even have a valuation greater than $13 billion. But for us, the thesis was, if you truly believe it's going to be a $1 trillion company, then $13 billion it's day one. It's early. This is pre-seed round. And so that was our thesis. Everyone at the time, handful of years ago, said, that's the dumbest early stage thing we've ever heard. Now we look like geniuses because it's the most high performing one. And everyone wishes they were in. And so I think that's just the fun part about early stage investing and even just being a founder is you're always doing the thing that's the dumbest thing everyone's ever heard until it's not. And then you either die or thrive.
Yeah. Interesting. So how long ago was the Anthropic investment? And I guess, what's their valuation now? I don't even have any idea.
Yeah, it's near $1 trillion. So I think it's like 900 billion and change, which is wild because the first time that we had this thesis was around SpaceX, where again, we got in under 20 billion, somewhere between 10 and 20 billion, and seems radically ridiculous to do as an early stage fund. And we take a relatively small allocation, which is now the dumbest thing we should have doubled, tripled. Put the whole darn fund. But we're trying to be fiscally responsible and not take too many wild swings. But now anywhere over 1.5 trillion is what they say SpaceX will go at. But both of those were, I forget the exact date. I should know it, but somewhere to 3 to 4 years ago.
Got it. Before everybody knew what ChatGPT was and all that other fun stuff and Claude and like that. So in that situation, it was early stage.
GPT was. Oh yeah, because generative AI was a thing, but I don't know if we had yet met our friend ChatGPT. So it's not the talk of every boardroom, but I think for us, it was the generative nature of it. And then it's another silly thesis to have, but it's more on my personal investing in the public markets. But not the man, but the technology, Elon Musk. Like I do admire the guy, but anything he touches, like he doesn't lose, like, except for his court case today. Other than that, he doesn't lose. So knowing that he was a part of OpenAI early and that the Anthropic team's just a deviation of that, it's like, well, we can't get into OpenAI. Let's get into the next best thing. And so we wanted to get into Anthropic. So that was mostly it. Was just basically bending us 2 degrees away from Elon and then the future of AI.
Yeah. So let's go back to, I always like to hear people's origin stories, and it sounds like you've been in the startup founder entrepreneurial game for a long, long time. So let's talk about the first company that you started, and then you said that you built and sold to Twitter. I'm just curious kind of what that was, how did it work, how long ago was it? And then I'd love to wrap us up or bring us up into present with Agree.
Yeah, so it was 2006, so 20 years ago now.
Okay.
It starts with just 2 dudes, 2 laptops making websites for people. But we had a very particular mindset on how to build websites. And there was this movement called the Web Standards Movement back then, but it was a pretty big deviation from how people were building websites. Another one where anyone that knows what they're doing would say you're crazy, and then the crazy ones say that you're a genius. And so there's a small cohort of people building websites this way, but it will eventually go on to be the foundation for how you build mobile websites, right? But we're doing this 2-3 years before the iPhone's invented. So nobody's really building for mobile, but we're big mobile nerds. And so when that moment hits and the whole world, just like now, the whole world's going AI, the whole world goes mobile almost instantaneously. There's a small cohort of human beings in the world that know how to build for it. And so we exploded almost overnight. All of our clients became Google, Firefox, all these Silicon Valley people, and then Apple. And Apple was our biggest, and we're doing a few $1 million a year with Apple. And then Apple offered to buy the company. At the same time, Twitter gets wind of it. They make an offer, and we were just big Twitter fans back then, and it was just cool and exciting. And Twitter's like at the time, this is like 2011, Twitter's like one of the darlings of Silicon Valley. People kind of forget that. But it was the coolest startup at the time, and it was pre-IPO. And Apple is cool, and I love Apple, and Apple has this beautiful design aesthetic, but they're the 25-year-old plus company where it's like, that's just not exciting.
Got it. So when you sold, was it, hey, I'm going to F off for a few months or a year or 2 or 10 and just go do your own thing? Or did you kind of have to roll into Twitter and then kind of work with them for a bit before you realize a lot of the success of what, selling a business is like?
Yeah. So practically, I'll get the lion's share of my value if I stay full 4 years, fully invest my stock specifically. But I do get a bunch of cash up front. I do have to stay for 1 year to keep that cash. So I'm economically incentive to at least stay a year. And then they make it a sweet for me if I stay 4. I make it exactly 1 year. And then, but I just got this awesome opportunity to go work at the White House as a presidential innovation fellow. So I was like, I got to do this. I also got an opportunity to go to grad school, and I was just like, okay, I think that because I wanted to get more into the business side of it. So I get my MBA. It's like, this makes a lot of sense to me. So there's just a lot of things I wanted to do in the world. And while Twitter was awesome, I kind of got max value. I got some nice disposable income in my bank account. I got this awesome exit story. I got to work there. I got to be in the heart of Silicon Valley at a really cool time. That's just like, now I want to go do all the things, all the things. Because that first company had been doing it. It's my only real company other than, I had a few day jobs before that, but I was there for like 7 years. It's like, I want to go try a bunch of stuff now.
Yeah. And so talk a little about the White House thing. I wasn't familiar with what you're doing at the White House. What was that gig like? Obviously very different than Silicon Valley, I would imagine.
Very different, very different. But the spirit of it was to bring the Silicon Valley culture into the White House. Now it's reminiscent of what Elon wanted to do with Doge, but make things more efficient, make them move faster. And a lot of what he did with Doge was built on the backs of what happened in 2012, because this presidential innovation fellow program gets started up. From that, you get this thing called 18F and this thing called USDS. And that's how Doge ends up becoming what it is on top of USDS. But for us, it was just bringing a bunch of Google, Twitter, Facebook people and see how they could be disruptive in a good way. But I always call it equal parts fascinating and frustrating, because you literally have, politics, and then you've got red tape, and the inertia is so slow. And then they tell us, they warn us, they say like, listen, the greatest work you're going to do here is the world will never see it for a decade. And you'll be long gone and you'll get no credit. That's not why you're here. But it was cool. It was fun. We got to do fun stuff like play basketball on the South Lawn in the Obama's court. We got to play, go bowling in the basement of the White House. So there's all those perks too.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. So let's flash forward a bit to the last 18 months. I guess talk a little about what is Agree.com. Why'd you start it? Let's talk a little about that.
Yeah, so it's a contract to cash. So everything from the moment your customer says yes to the second they sign that contract, you create that invoice, you get that invoice billed, paid, and you recognize that revenue. We do the full end-to-end workflow, but basically we just realized at the end of every signature, that DocuSign, someone's got to pay someone money. The process to do so has just been so fragmented and disjointed. Why don't we bring it together? And what really frustrated me is just, I get the end of these DocuSigns and DocuSign gives that little checkbox that just says you're done. And every time I just think I'm not done. The deal's not done till the wire hits, till the check clears. And I was just like, why does DocuSign think it's done? And then inversely, not to put all the blame on DocuSign, why does Stripe think it ends with a payment when it starts with a contract? Like why did the world not connect these things? And then I really got into it because I realized a lot of this is our invoices are just really dumb invoices. Our invoices don't do payments. Our invoices don't do billing. Our invoices have no context of the original contract that we signed. All they know are line items and quantities and subtotals. And our invoices can't do collections because they don't know what the terms are if the invoice is late or past due. And I just thought, that's super interesting. How do we make a more intelligent invoice? And today we'd call it generative or agentic, but it's really just this automation of making it context aware of the original contract and then having embedded payments and billing sort of incorporated into it.
So walk me through it. So I'm assuming this is all B2B. Right. So it's like you and I have businesses and let's say I provide a good or service to your business. I would send you an agreement to say, if I give you X, you're going to pay me Y and in Z terms, I would say. So we go through the DocuSign process. And then how does your system kind of continue the process to make our lives easier so that I get paid on time? You don't have to worry about me following up. Like how does it all maybe work? Maybe give us an example.
Yeah, this was kind of the aha moment because there's always a technological unlock. So a lot of what we're doing is only possible because of specifically generative AI. And then on top of it, an older technology called OCR, optical character recognition. But essentially in that sales contract lives everything, all the data you need to do end-to-end revenue workflow automation. So in that sales contract, who pays who? Net 45, net 60, what they're paying for, how much they're paying, what happens if it's late, if there's an upfront, if there's an escrow, if there's a deposit, all of those details are in the sales contract. So if you extract all of that payment and billing data as just data and variables, you realize those are the exact same data points you need to generate the invoice. Everything in the invoice is one of those. So if we own, imagine that e-signature, the contract, the DocuSign is just a Trojan horse of payment data. If you own the contract, you have that data, then you can just make the invoice. No more humans, no more sending the contract to finance for finance to go manually make the invoice. The invoice just exists by the existence of the contract. So the invoice actually exists the second the contract is drafted. As soon as you draft the contract, and every time you input, more data, you give it a contact name, boom, that goes into the invoice. As soon as you set a due date on when things are in whatever terms are, that shows up in the invoice. And then on the collection side, this is where I get really excited, is I get so annoyed when I get an invoice past due reminder, and all it says in the subject line is invoice 187.B is 15 days past due. That means nothing to me. It's an easy get to it on Monday. What you really want to do is have two human beings say a message from one party to the other saying, hey, really excited to kick off that web development project with you, for your big redesign. Saw you open the invoice 4 days ago. If you've got any questions or comments, let me know. Just as a reminder, if we don't get started on this date, our schedule's full and we're going to have to back schedule you another 14 days. And that email people respond to. And that because you want the thing that you're paying for. You don't want to pay for the thing that you need. Nobody wants to pay an invoice, but everyone
Right.
wants to start a project. And so that's one where that's not a technological disruption. That's just better UI UX. But the only reason it's possible is because now the invoice is smart enough that it has context of the agreement. It knows what the project is. It knows the two humans that are communicating between each other, not just AP at company name, which is how most of our invoices are addressed to today.
Yeah. And so once the service is delivered, so in your example, it was more of a prepayment or a retainer to get started, but let's assume that I did something and then, you owe me for said thing. I'm assuming it picks it up again and says, and on my side, I just say invoice for the final product or whatever. It'll know what the numbers are. Maybe I have to input the actual kind of dollars and cents in there, and then it'll kind of do the same process. Is there a payment method capture in the sense that you being the receiving company of said service, you have to upload a bank account, a credit card or whatever, so that on that date, let's say it's net 30 terms on the 30th day, if you haven't already paid it, it's going to automatically deduct out of your account and move it over to mine? Like, is your platform that far, I guess, in kind of closing the loop?
And it's super flexible in that, like, it's yes to everything, and it's a yes and where I'm a big fan of, if I can get you to pay right here, right now, that's awesome. If it is net 30 terms and you want to pay on the 31st day, let's at least get your credit card on file so that on that day, I'm not pinging you, I'm just swiping the card, programmatically. Same with ACH wire. Let's at least get your bank account routing numbers now and get them stored, and then let's pull the funds on that day. Because that gives me pretty good confidence if I got your billing data that we can go forward with the project. But for your client's perspective, if they want to store, they can. If they want to pay now, they can. And then if they just want to go the traditional route of, hey, remind me when it's due, and then I'll just do it then. But I find that most people don't want to do that because they want what's on the other side, and they don't want to forget. And they are good stewards, and they did have good intent to want to do this, and they don't want to be late. But some people might want to wait the full time. But with most B2B, especially B2B SaaS, most people want what's on the other side of that transaction enough that they're incentivized to pay quicker. For example, if you are hiring that freelance designer who's the hottest person in town, if you don't pay that first upfront, they're going to book their schedule and you're going to lose them. Same thing is true when you find that commercial office space that you really want. If you don't put that deposit down, they're not going to take it off the market. They're going to keep showing it. If you need that SOC 2 because you just landed your first enterprise customer, you need the SOC 2 to start yesterday, not in net 30 from now. So those are the kind of transactions we see a lot. We see a lot of commercial roofers, commercial solar panel installers, all that kind of stuff. You need that roof fixed now. You need them on the books. You need them scheduled because even the solar panel, they're so back scheduled that I'm still booking them 6 months out. So if I don't get on their calendar right here, right now, I'm going to have to wait a year.
Yeah. What industries have you seen be more apt to use kind of Agree.com, the full life cycle, versus just doing this traditional QuickBooks, DocuSign plus a QuickBooks or something like that?
Yeah. So right out of the gate, we had a lot of SMB mid-market companies. So we don't go too far up market to the enterprise. I'd say most of the folks on Agree do somewhere between $1 million to $50 million in annual revenue. You have a long tail of freelancers, contractors that do under $1 million. They might average around $250,000 to $350,000. And you got some folks that are a little bit bigger than $50 million. But for the most part, it's B2B SaaS, B2B services. We see a lot of agencies, PR agencies, design dev shops. You see a lot of recruitment agencies. And then we see some of these folks where I don't know what the right term is. The end person doing the work, you'd call it a blue collar job, like installing a solar panel on a commercial roof. But the business itself, people forget, roofs are expensive. Commercial roofs are really expensive. And we've got a lot of security camera installers, but on commercial buildings where we're talking about, a $40 million office building that just went up to put cameras in every single suite, every single unit, every single floor, and in the elevators. That's a really big contract. Same with the solar panel installations. And so those I'd never seen coming. It's just all of a sudden one day we had the third largest roofer in Detroit using Agree. And then we realized, there's something here. Let's go after this segment a little bit more.
Yeah. And then you charge what? Like, is it a monthly subscription for like unlimited, or do you charge per invoice or per contract? Like, how do the economics work for you?
Yeah, so we wanted to disrupt DocuSign's pricing model, and we were pretty early on this because it's pretty trendy now on Twitter and LinkedIn too. That charging per seat per head is going away. Usage based is getting more popular, but we said, hey, at the end of all this, we're just a payments company. We're basically another. You're rip and replace a Stripe. So if somebody does swipe that credit card, somebody somewhere is getting charged 2.9 and 30 or something close to it. So we're just going to make money that way. So instead of paying Stripe 2.9 and 30, pay us 2.9 and 30. But that means if we make our money on the transaction side, everything else is free. We don't charge for the e-signature. We don't charge for the invoicing. So anything that you're paying, DocuSign, PandaDocs, QuickBooks, Bill.com, that's all 100% free now. No trial, no limits, no caps, because everyone always asks, is there a cap on how many employees? Like, no, I want as many of your employees in the platform sending as many contracts as possible, sending as many invoices as possible, because the more invoices, the more payment, the more swipes.
Right.
And then we take a tiny little percentage. So we're in the payments game, so it's a scale game. At the end of it all, we live and die on 0.6%. So it's very small, but $1 billion in transactions, that ends up adding up pretty high. That's like $6 million a year.
Interesting. And so you said that you raised some money or just recently raised some money, I guess. What's the growth trajectory or growth plan for that money? Obviously, when you raise money, you're typically investing in the product and the technology, but you're also, historically, you're investing a lot of money in people, right? But obviously with AI, you may be investing it more in agentic people versus humans. Yeah. So maybe talk us through that as somebody that's building a business now in this world of AI.
Yeah, a lot of token maxing, as the kids call it these days. But Claude's a big part of the team. But yeah, we raised $3 million pre-seed in week one of the company. So that was pretty fast. It took us like 3 weeks to close that round. And then the goal there was just usage, because we raised on our backgrounds and a little tiny prototype, but like there's no product, there's no traction. So we got to get users. So I called that era signature and a pulse. Anyone I could find that's got to sign something. And then I wasn't really quite sure what the KPI would be. I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't going to be revenue, not that early. But when we actually launched in September of that year, 2024, I think it was within 30 days, there was 1,000 users. I think 6 weeks later, it had gone to like 5,000 users. And then pretty quick, we had doubled that to 10,000 users. And that's when we decided we were going to go to market for the seed round. Because what we had shown there was a PLG motion, product-led growth, where it was like 33% of the users, and it's still true to this day, they signed up because someone sent them docs to sign. So it's like, okay, the more people send docs, the more users sign up to send docs. And then it starts compounding. And now, users are like 113,000, I think is the new count now, but still a lot of it's just that organic stuff. So a lot of people, somebody's asked me, because we make money on the payment side, and you can use us just for e-signature. You don't have to use us for invoicing. And some people will think they're getting one over on me. They're like, well, what if I only use you for e-signature and I don't pay anything? It's like, dude, I will still get value out of that because you're basically a little marketing engine. Every one of your customers who does signatures and invoicing also, if they love the experience, right? I'm not going to put them on a mailing list. I'm not going to hound them, but they're just going to organically because they trust you, right? They're buying something from you. So they've trusted that you've picked a really great tool. And they're like, maybe I should be using Agree. And thankfully, almost 1 out of 3 end up doing that.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. If you give away the DocuSign, you're essentially anybody you send a contract to you're essentially building mini marketing companies all over the place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you capture, I guess, for free, sounds like you may be capturing data, right? So how do you put up a little bit of a Chinese wall, or maybe you don't, that, if I'm going to use this for free, I'm essentially putting in some sensitive information about probably my company, my client, some of my maybe terms and services that may be slightly unique to me or not, but how do you capture any of the data, or how do you, protect that information?
I was going to say, we don't expose any of the data. We don't give the data to anybody, but we capture all the data, but only for your net benefit on your account, right? Because we want to use your contract data for your invoices, but we don't want to use your contract data for anybody else's purposes. And it is an important caveat because on a podcast like this, I'll throw around free quite freely. But when we're doing a demo or a pitch, we'll explain the economics, but I'll quickly go into the monetization to let them know how we're powering this whole thing from a revenue perspective, just because everyone's first inclination, if anything's free, there's the old Zuckerberg thing. If something's free, then you're the product.
Right.
We want to make sure that they know that we're not selling their data or like that's how we monetize. And then I do give them that PLG story, and then like, oh, I get how it makes sense and why you can do it, how you can afford to give something away for free. But no, for us, it is just it's either branding and marketing on the distribution side, or eventually getting you, even if you're just on the e-sig side. I usually feel pretty confident. It's very rare, even if you're using invoices somewhere else, that you're going to stick with it. If you love Agree on e-signature, it's just going to be so much easier to do it all in one, even if you're not ready day one. And that's why we won't push it. We'll just do a long sales cycle with you. Just do e-signature for now. You'll fall in love with invoices later.
Yeah. And then are you trying to replace, like, if you're dealing with a lot of small businesses that most of them will run on like a QuickBooks or a like product, are you trying to replace that product entirely, or you're just really focused on contract, invoice, payment? We're not worrying about your books and profit and loss and all that. Like that's not that. And I guess, would you then integrate into those systems so that they can, obviously realize or see that information?
Yeah, so QuickBooks is the most confusing one because Intuit does everything. But QuickBooks is great at being an ERP. It's great at bookkeeping and accounting. It is not great at invoicing, right? Invoicing was just something they did at one point to win over or keep some customers. So we always tell people, hey, keep QuickBooks for the accounting bookkeeping side. We're not going to change your accountant or bookkeeper's workflows or your CPAs. Keep those tools into place, and then we'll integrate with them. So we do integrate with QuickBooks, but we are a rip and replace of QuickBooks invoicing. So today, the stack for most companies is once you get that yes from the customer, you go into something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs to draft up the contract. Then you turn it into a PDF. You go into something like PandaDocs or Google Docs to send it out for signature. Once that's been signed, you send it over to someone in finance. Maybe it's you if you're small enough. And you open up something like QuickBooks Invoicing or Bill.com to generate the invoice. You may go into something like Stripe to set up recurring or subscription or usage-based payments. And then if it's ever late or missing, you're manually knocking on doors to track things down. So that's 5 different workflows. And we are a rip and replace of all 5. So rip and replace on the drafting side, rip and replace on the signature side, the invoicing, the billing side, and then also the recovery side.
Got it. Fascinating. Interesting. And I guess, so as you think about kind of, you've landed this seed round, you've kind of hit that 0 to 1 phase, and now you're kind of in that 1 to as far as you can go phase. What's the kind of plan, I guess, for the next 6 to 12 months? We're recording this in kind of mid-May 2026. Like, how do you see the rest of 2026 going? Not necessarily from a global perspective, but maybe more for Agree.com, because nobody can predict what's happening elsewhere.
Yeah. So I talked about signature and a pulse from pre-seed to seed, and the 10,000 user that's now 100,000 user. Now it's what is the seed to Series A? There's like the Twitter logic is, I think Carta put out some data where the median ARR that a seed company raises is 2.5 million. So everyone says generally 3 to 5 million is the standard logic, which I get so frustrated by because everybody in Silicon Valley wants you to be disruptive and transformative and do something no one's ever done before. But then they want you to have exactly 12 slides, and they want the first slide to be this, and they want your ARR. So you want me to conform here, but to be totally unconformed. Yeah. Okay, I got you. Yeah, that's not counterintuitive at all. But on our side, it is working towards ARR, but it's not. The things that we don't focus on are unit economics. We're always big on telling people that that's a Series A to Series B conversation. It's just growth at all costs, which is, an old school startup to VC path. But for me, what I look at, because I'm an order of operations guy, let's just say I do want the 5 million ARR. Well, I make money on percentage of payment. Things are only paid if they're invoiced. Invoices are only generated if contracts are signed. So I just need more users sending more contracts, generating more invoices. So I look at annual aggregate invoice volume. And our first number was, let's get that to be 100 million. Remember, it's not 100 million for me, 0.6% of 100 million. So 600,000, it's not a whole. But then let's get that to be a 500 million. Then let's get that to be $1 billion. And then in between the 500 million to $1 billion number is the point at which people get really excited.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm curious now to chat a little bit more about kind of the venture fund. And so you've obviously had a lot of success getting access to deals that the normal human beings don't get access to, and very early into that process. What are you seeing now, and how has your, I guess what's your feeling on all these AI companies that seemingly are just wrappers around an LLM that, are going to be displaced by said LLM because they can just add a feature or add a skill or something like that. So I guess what are you seeing in kind of the startup world as you're looking at, additional investments from the fund?
Yeah, I think the things that we still love developer tools. If you'd asked me this question 3 years ago, I think one of the thesis we would have had is, where does generative AI on top of what is disruptive? So for us personally, Gen AI on top of OCR, but then we thought, hey, Gen AI on top of CAD, it is CAD software, right? Like just what hasn't changed in 20 years that's right to change overnight. Now it kind of feels like, oof, I don't know if CAD's going to go the way of Figma, and just like these are going to be embedded into everyone's product. So maybe that's not as specialized as it used to be. But I'm starting to look at more specifically financial reporting. So I've noticed that the Anthropics of the world have put out a bunch of tooling for SMBs, which is just kind of a wrapper on Anthropic itself. So it's like the old product line just said a different way. But then OpenAI released a whole personal financial management suite, which most people say, hey, it's an instant killer to the PFMs, your mint.coms of the world. But I think most of the VC world wrote that category off a bit ago. So I don't know who was building in that didn't know that was already a dying category. But what I think is, well, your CFO of your $100 million company today, I don't think is prompting their way to generating their annual report. But I do think something like revenue recognition, which Agree thinks a lot about, I think that gets done in a prompt tomorrow. And I think it's more real time and it gets done more frequently. I think things that we used to do once a year or once a quarter, those are going to get done daily, hourly, in an agentic world every second. Someone brought this up to me the other day, which I thought was really interesting. I saw a pitch, but it didn't feel unique enough to stand on its own. But they said, pricing strategy. That's something that you would hire McKinsey to do. You do it once a year, if that, maybe once every couple of years. But you're with usage based, you're going to be doing dynamic repricing every day per customer, per geography. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's something that you could never afford to do. It'd be totally inefficient to have done with McKinsey, with humans. But now in an agentic world, yeah, you could do that much more frequently. So I started thinking about that. What was impractical or inefficient with humans before that you would only have done a few times a year, or that you can do now multiple times a day, a minute, an hour. I saw this thing from Ramp, and I won't ramble on this too much, but I just thought it was so clever in this same vein. But this was like a year and a half ago, where when you use their Ramp card to book your hotel, up until the day of your stay, it'll go back multiple times a day and see if the price dropped. And if it does, it books the new one and then cancels the old one. So by the time you show up, you've got the optimal price, even if I only $10. But you and I, we never would have done that. You and I aren't calling up the hotel every day to try to save $10. That would have made even our assistant, that would have made sense for. But for an agent, as long as the tokens to do so were less than $10, right? Even if it's $9.99 and all you did was save a penny, it doesn't bother you and I. So who cares, right? I saved a penny.
Yeah, there's no friction for you. It's like you show up and you're like, hey, I've got this room. And it's like, yep, you do. Now, the thing that would be worse is if you show up and you don't have a room, or you had a good room and now you got a terrible room. But obviously there's probably parameters you can put around that.
Yeah, which I thought was clever on their side, because the one thing I remember thinking the same thing is there was a lot of asterisks to it. When they're doing the bookings on the Ram side, it's all on rooms that can be canceled up until basically, the last hour, 24 hours. And then they are specifically booking first before they're canceling the old booking. So So there is a
Yeah.
moment in time in which there's two bookings. And then my understanding with Ramp is that they were eating the cost of the second booking for short moment of time, right? Like those 30 seconds while two exist at the same moment, but
Yeah.
specifically so that they never have this issue where you show up without a room.
Right. Got it. Got it. Um, as we kind of wind things down here a little bit, I'm actually heading to a pitch event here in Silicon Valley in a little bit after we record. And I'm curious kind of what you're seeing in pitches now, or what you look for in pitches, specifically from the startup founder, whether I've got an idea and here's what I'm doing to build it, or they've got a business that's kind of at the MVP stage, because this is an early stage kind of thing around AI. So I'm just kind of curious what you look for in the founder or founders that's not necessarily in the slides or in the product, but what about them would be something that's like, okay, that's a check the box of like, I think this is the right person or team to dig in more, and obviously the company has to make sense as well.
Yeah, and I'll answer the question what I'm looking for, but to get there, I've become hyper fixated on a few things that I know that I'm not looking for. And one of the things, especially in the early stage side, is, and this has changed for me over the last 2 years, but I'm not looking for the vision of the future where they're painting this picture of like, oh, that's so obvious, because that's the one thing that's accelerated is, the world will be different. We will all interact differently. Like that's just inevitable now. Yes, I agree with you, but now my real question is, are you the two to bring it to life? Some other founder's going to do this. I just don't know who. So I try not to get thinking about that at all. What I'm really interested is they've got to have some kind of wedge or some kind of edge. These days, it's got to be I think about AI, because I mean, obviously everything's going to be AI centric in some way, form or fashion. But AI, I think I attribute it to the telephone, where, another great invention that was totally disruptive to how we all live our lives. We all have one in our pockets sitting next to us right now. But when you invent the first telephone, it's completely useless until you invent the second telephone, right? Because there's a network effect with telephones. But with AI, amazing technology, but completely useless without data. So I'm looking for edges and wedges, but I am looking for a data play. What data they have access to in aggregate that other people don't. And then I don't need them to have totally figured out what they're going to do with all that data. They've got one inkling and an idea, but when I can think through, okay, there's like 5 or 6 different paths, that becomes really exciting to me. And then monetization, and again, this is a little selfish to agree because this is how we think about it, but how can you disrupt, like how can you go into a room and say that DocuSign has a $12 billion market cap, but nobody will ever pay for that service ever again because I can give it away for free if I make money somewhere else. So I've been looking at a lot of that too, which I think will be disruptive as we rethink B2B SaaS and we rethink per seat per head, or we rethink usage-based billing.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an off-the-wall question a bit, but like, because you read all these articles. A lot of my clients on the recruiting side are all B2B SaaS companies, and so you see all these article headlines of SaaS is dead and AI is going to kill SaaS. And I get it from a certain point, but a big company's not going to vibe code their way to an ERP system tomorrow, right? And I guess, how do you think about kind of the SaaS model of per seat billing versus usage based and token based and all of that?
Yeah, so I do agree that like per seat's going to die. I do not think that Jira is going to die because someone vibe coded it, or we all vibe code our own instances of it. We can do a whole hour on that podcast. But the easiest way I tell people is that, like, listen, Keurig made it so easy to make coffee. It's a plastic pod in a machine. You press a button and there's coffee. Yet we are all spending more at coffee shops than we ever have before. And a lot of us are paying DoorDash to deliver that coffee to our door. Like, there's no indicator in the way that we do business in B2B or in B2C that indicates we're actually going the opposite direction. We are paying people. Most of us don't know how to change our own tire. We don't know how to change our own oil. We are outsourcing this stuff. So this doesn't change anything on that camp. And the other parts of your question, I think about headless a lot. Because I think per seat will die, but because I think we'll make money elsewhere. And so we'll start to see more offerings like what we're doing with e-signature come up for free, just because I think more companies like Agree will be able to do more. We're going to see more horizontal, I think less vertical, which is a shift. But I think headless is a big one. I just don't know who's the source of truth. Benioff seems to think it won't be Salesforce. I would have thought it would be Salesforce. I would have thought he wanted it to be Salesforce. But, we do a lot of cool stuff at Agree now where we have an MCP. So in Claude, you can tell it, hey, create a growth contract with Marty for $12,500, bill monthly, and do for a term of 12 months. and it knows exactly what to do because Agree's connected. You connected your HubSpot with Agree, so it knows who Marty is and at what company he is. And if there's two Martys, it'll sub-prompt you to pick a Marty. And then it'll send the contract for signature. Once I sign, it'll ask you if you want to confirm sending the invoice and sends the invoice. I was like, that's pretty cool. Now, do I think most business owners want that? No. But do I think, let's just say we're doing a sales call right now and you're using Granola. At the end of this call, does Granola Notes say, hey, sounds like it went pretty well with Marty. You want to kick off the contract? It's like, that makes sense to me. Why would you open up agree.com? Why would you jump into agree.com? If in your Slack, that's what should have happened is you get a little in your GTM channel. Likelihood of Marty converting 87%, click here to generate contracts. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Press the button.
Interesting. I love it. It's a good place to end, and we'll wrap things up with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So first question is, what's a book or maybe even a podcast that you've read or found helpful that you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, so especially for this audience where it's this blend between startups and VCs, I love The Power Law because I live and die by The Power Law. But the book is called The Power Law. It's Sebastian Malaby. He's got a new book out now too around AI that's really good. I think it's called The Infinite Machine. But the Power Law. If you're like, what is the Power Law? Definitely buy this book. It's for people beyond just VC. It's a little dense. It's a little academic, but it fundamentally changes my life, how I think about taking big swings, multiple bets. We live and die on it with the venture fund, but it's also how I think about how we do our own product roadmap and how we decide prioritizations within the company. But yeah, Power Law for sure on the book side.
Love it. I feel like I've heard somebody recommend that before, but I hadn't read it, so I will put it on the top of my list to look at. Perfect. Second question here. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
I love poker. I'm not a good poker player, so everyone loves inviting me, but I have a lot of fun playing poker. And it works out like I live in New York now, but I spend a lot of time in San Francisco, and I was in San Francisco before, but a lot of the tech events these days are poker events. And I just find like, it's kind of nice. You're at a table, not more than 10 people. You got a cocktail or a beer, and you're locked in for like an hour or so. You really get to know somebody better than one of these like, fancy dinners where you can really only talk to the person to the left or the right of you. At a poker table, you're screaming across. You can talk about more than just business because you're talking about the hand. I think from a business perspective, you just get to learn a lot about people, right? Who's the bullshitter? Who's really good at sales? Like who's a little bit more risk adverse?
Yeah. That's interesting because I just moved to Silicon Valley and I am a terrible poker player because I have very little patience. So people love when I come because I just give away my money because I'm like, let's just get this going. But yeah, interesting. Okay, I'll have to look for poker events and check those out. All right, last question here, Marty. Favorite vacation spot?
I love Spain. I love Spanish food, but Alicante. It's on the Mediterranean. It's just like most Americans don't know about it. It's a nice European sort of vacation spot, but it's a small little city that's kind of hard to get to, so it doesn't get too crowded. And just beautiful Mediterranean water, and the temperature is always near perfect, and the food's amazing. So I just love this little city, Alicante. Now I've ruined it because now everyone knows.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I've had a few people say, I'm not going to give you the city, but I'm going to tell you the region because they don't want to have everybody go there. But no, I appreciate that. I've not been to Spain. It's on the list. But yeah, we'll have to maybe check that out. So Marty, this has been a lot of fun. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about you, the venture fund, agree.com, like what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, Twitter's the best. X, as you'd call it. I'm just Marty Madrid on there. I've been active for 19 years. I post like 10 times a day, every day. So that's the best place. You comment on my stuff, I'll comment on your stuff. I'll find you. I'll see it because I'm obsessive with everything. And then pretty active on LinkedIn, but don't LinkedIn DM me because my team uses it for sales. So my DMs are shot. And then email. I'm just Marty@marty.com. So super easy to remember.
Very cool. Marty, man, thank you very much for being a guest. It was really cool to hear your story.
Dude, thanks for having me. This was awesome. I loved it.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.